They dropped us like waste. No last words, no recovery plan, just silence. The transport ship had barely touched down before the ramp was raised again, and the engine trails disappeared into the red-gray skies. It wasn't even a real landing, just a dump and liftoff. They'd sent us to die on a planet that wasn't even mapped properly. I remember standing in the dust, helmet still clipped to my waist, listening to the fading roar of the ship. It felt like betrayal, but deeper. This wasn't just being left behind. This was being erased. We were the 17th Terran Recon Division, once proud, once elite. Now 248 soldiers dumped like infected meat on a planet called Taraxis 9, a failed colony turned into a quarantine zone after alien bio-warfare wiped out everything that breathed. The Galactic Allied Command told us we were being redeployed to secure a former asset. Lies. All lies. They knew it was a death sentence. The place stank of decay and something worse, that wet metal smell of things that had been alive, mutated, and left to rot. Buildings were nothing more than scorched bones of concrete and steel. We couldn't even find full bodies, just pieces. Like something had ripped its way through the colony with a hunger that didn't stop when the screaming did. And still, no communication. Command was dark. The satellite uplinks we had weren't even real, just empty shells designed to keep us hopeful for a few more hours. Corporal Jaley figured it out when he cracked open the first comm drone and found the transmitter was a recycled cooking unit with a flashing LED glued on. They didn't even bother to fake it properly. Day 1 was confusion. Day 2 was rage. By day 5, we stopped pretending help was coming. Captain Resnick, hard-eyed, old-school, and twice court-martialed, took command with a new tone in his voice. He didn't give speeches, just orders, and one line that stuck in our bones. They want us dead. Let's make surviving their worst mistake. We scavenged what we could. Plasma rifles with cracked coolant tubes, ration packs filled with synthetic protein mold. Half of our medkits had already expired. But we were human, earthborn, war-fed, and too stubborn to lay down quietly. And the worst part? The planet wasn't empty. It started with movement in the ruins. Shadow figures. Quick, low to the ground, hunched but fast. At first we thought they were survivors. Then they dragged Private Lynn into the smoke, and we heard bones crack. When we found him, what was left of him, we knew. This wasn't just about surviving the land. We were not alone. Resnick ordered the squad into night patrols and fallback kill zones. We used the buildings, the natural ridges, anything we could find. We turned what was left of the colony into a fortress of scavenged tech and ruthless strategy. And still, they came. The creatures, we called them Ashborn, weren't like the enemy species we'd fought before. No language, no reason, just hunger and hate. Like they remembered the people who'd left them behind, too. Like we shared the same grudge. We started learning their patterns. They avoided fire. They hated sound. Our engineers rigged old generators into sonic pulse bombs that made them screech and scatter. We studied their bodies when we killed them, their joints, the way they moved, the organs that pulsed under transparent flesh. Sergeant Dyko even figured out they had some kind of collective memory, like killing one taught the others. It wasn't enough. They kept coming. By the 3rd week, we were down to 121 soldiers, half rations, low ammo. And yet no one asked for rescue. No one cried for home. We knew what we were now, cast out, forgotten, and too angry to die quietly. Resnick started saying it during morning call-outs. From the ashes, boys, we rise from the ashes. Somewhere between surviving and fighting, we stopped waiting to be saved. We started building. Not just bunkers and traps, but something bigger. We began charting the land, mapping old infrastructure, tapping into geothermal vents. scavenging alien tech left behind in the ruins. Taraxis 9 had been a graveyard. We were turning it into a forge. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were something else. And that's when the signals started again. But not from Earth. Not from the Galactic Council. From orbit. From them. Unidentified vessel. No IFF signature. No translation matrix. Just one chilling phrase repeated over and over. The Ashborn are not yours to command. You were warned. We looked at each other that night. 103 of us left. Resnick lit a flare and said, "They think they can still warn us?" He smiled, the kind of smile that usually comes just before something explodes. "Let's teach 'em what humans do when we've got nothing left to lose." We had always assumed we were the only living things on this graveyard of a planet. We were wrong. And it was never a graveyard. It was a cage. By the time the alien signal first hit our comm grid, we had adapted enough to recognize that it wasn't a distress beacon or a rescue attempt. It was a warning, a line drawn by something watching from above. Something that had known about this place long before we'd been dumped on it like military garbage. The message was clean. Too clean. Not some jumbled static like we were used to pulling out of the old transmitters. "The Ashborn are not yours to command. You were warned." That one line looped for hours, repeated in a perfect, neutral tone. No emotion, no origin code, just the eerie implication that we'd crossed a line we didn't know existed. Resnick ordered a blackout. No more open comms. No electronic pulses beyond our perimeter. The engineers rewired our tracking beacons to pulse dead data. To the skies. We were ghosts again. But ghosts don't rebuild power cores. Ghosts don't hunt. We had become something else, something feral and brilliant. And that made us dangerous. The Ashborn had changed, too. They used to come at us like swarms, a wall of limbs and teeth and instinct. But the ones we were seeing now were smarter, more patient. They waited. They tested our traps. They sent decoys to trip our perimeter and watched for our response. It was Daiko who noticed it first. He called me over to the edge of the western trench, a jagged crevice we had fortified after one too many night assaults. He pointed to the far ridge where 3 of the Ashborn knelt, unmoving. "See that?" he whispered. "They're just watching," I muttered. "Waiting?" Daiko shook his head. "They're triangulating us. Every time we reset the mines, they show up 15 minutes later, positioned like sentries. That's not instinct. That's tactics." It was like something had taught them, or worse, something was controlling them. That night we lost 2 more, Varel and Chen. Varel had been on perimeter with me since day 3. Her laughter used to echo through the ruins, the last sound of joy we had. We found what was left of her halfway up a comms tower, shredded and pinned to the metal like a warning flag. Underneath her was a mark. Burned into the scorched wall, a symbol, not from Earth, not human, and definitely not random. Resnick studied it with a grim face, his gloved fingers tracing the strange, angular lines that shimmered with faint heat. "It's them," he said. "Aliens?" "No, not aliens. Controllers. The ones who dropped us here. The ones watching now." There was fury in his voice, but also something colder. Resolve. We had a choice now. Wait to be hunted into extinction or escalate. So we escalated. The engineers rigged the old geothermal plants into directed energy weapons. Crude, unstable, but powerful enough to light up the sky. We pulled core plasma from downed drones and refashioned them into railgun charges. The medics turned leftover stims into combat enhancers. Reckless, untested, brutal stuff that burned twice as fast as it healed. And every single soldier agreed to use it. We were done surviving. Now we were preparing to fight back. On day 47, we made first contact. Not with words, not with diplomacy, but with blood. An orb ship descended from orbit, sleek, silver, and silent, like a tear in the sky. It didn't land. It hovered just outside the range of our air scramblers, casting a deep hum over the ruins like a predator watching its prey shift in the grass. Then it deployed something. We watched from the ridge, 92 of us left, as a pod detached and dropped into the northern sector. It cracked open like an egg and released a creature unlike the Ashborn. Taller, armored, controlled. This one wasn't wild. This one was sent. It didn't attack right away. It scanned. The motion was slow, deliberate, like it could smell our defiance and wanted to catalog it. When two of our scouts moved, it turned, not aggressively, but calculating, as if it already knew where they were and was just waiting for confirmation. We named it the Warden. It was the first of many. The Wardens came in ones and twos, sent by the Watchers above. Their job wasn't to destroy us. It was to test us, to gauge how far we'd come from dumped troops to defiant survivors, and maybe, just maybe, to see if we were worth correcting. They started broadcasting new messages as the attacks escalated. You were warned. Step back from forbidden reclamation. This world is sealed. Human access is revoked. Return to decay. Return to dust. Each one more condescending than the last. We ignored every one of them. When the first warden fell, crushed between two rigged blast walls and finished by point-blank fire, we tore its armor apart like wolves dissecting prey. Inside, we found a core, a glowing hexagonal matrix. Power we hadn't seen before. Alien, pure, and adaptable. Daiko worked on it for 5 days straight. No sleep, barely any food, just muttering to himself and drawing schematics in dirt with bloodied fingers. When he was done, we had a prototype, a weapon that fired not just energy, but disruption pulses, the same tech the Warden used to shut down our minds. We reversed it. Now it shut them down. On day 62, we sent our first message back into orbit. Not with words, with fire. The next Warden drop pod that came down was intercepted mid-air by a repurposed orbital claw, something the engineers jerry-rigged from salvage and nightmare logic. The moment it latched on, we pumped the core with the stolen energy matrix and detonated it as it screamed back to its carrier ship. The sky turned purple, the clouds parted, and for the first time in weeks, we saw retreat. The ship pulled back. It didn't leave, but it retreated, like a snake wounded for the first time. Cheers rang out. Resnick lit a flare and shoved it into the sky. Even through the masks and dust, we laughed. For a moment, we were more than soldiers. We were humanity, rising from ash with blood still on our hands and a spark in our eyes. But victories come at a cost. That night, the Ashborn attacked like never before. Not in rage, not in chaos, in formation, rows, flanks, coordinated, flawless, like someone was finally piloting the beast. We fought until the sun rose, only 68 of us left standing. And then the final message came. You were meant to fail, yet you resist. This anomaly will be corrected. No signature, no source, just the threat. But they had underestimated one thing. We weren't just surviving, we were evolving. What they dropped into the fire had come out tempered and sharpened. What they thought would burn had become a forge. We were no longer what they cast out. We were the beginning of something new. Resnick gathered us at dawn, burned, bleeding, barely upright. His voice was hoarse when he spoke, but every word hit like a railgun blast. They wanted to erase us. They wanted to watch us crumble. But we learned. We bled, and we adapted. So now, We're not asking for a seat at their table. We're flipping the whole goddamn table over. And in that moment, I knew this planet would not just be our survival. It would be our launch pad. The sky hadn't changed in weeks. Still burned red with dust storms, still streaked with the remains of whatever alien weather system passed for clouds here. But something in the air had changed. It wasn't the planet. It was us. There were 68 of us left now. We weren't soldiers anymore, not in the way we used to be, not in the way the galaxy understood. Soldiers followed orders. We gave our own. Soldiers fought battles. We were planning a war, and we'd already won the first round. The last orbital ship, the one that had dropped the Warden, hadn't returned. We knew they were still watching, still orbiting somewhere beyond the upper atmosphere. But they hadn't dared another assault since we downed the last drop pod and turned its core into a pulsed rail system that now powered the eastern quadrant of our reclaimed outpost. We were supposed to rot here. Instead, we were building. Our fortress, now dubbed Red Bastion, had grown from a scavenged colony wreck into a hardened outpost surrounded by mines, energy walls, and sonic scramblers. The Ashborn still tested us at night, but even they were cautious now. Smarter. As if something had told them that this wasn't the same human camp from 40 nights ago. Because it wasn't. We were adapting faster than we had any right to, faster than human. Daiko was the first to show signs. He'd been splicing the alien Warden tech into his body, microfilament mesh across his neural pathways, feeding directly from the core battery we'd salvaged. It was reckless, experimental, and just plain stupid by most standards. But Daiko was always 3 steps past stupid when it came to engineering genius. On day 73, he collapsed. His eyes went white, body convulsing. Resnick wanted to put him down, no chances taken, but I stopped him. Not because I was sure Daiko would live, but because I had seen what he'd built inside himself. This wasn't possession. This wasn't infection. This was integration. When he woke 2 days later, he didn't speak for almost an hour, just stared at the sky like he was seeing something none of us could. Then he turned to me with a voice flat and quiet. "They think I'm listening." "Who?" I asked. He smiled. "Not human? Not alien? Just new. The ones above. The ones who built the Ashborn. The ones who run the cage." Daiko's brain had changed. Enhanced, rewired, upgraded. We didn't have words for it yet. He could process data 40 times faster than our best systems. He could reroute plasma flow from a reactor by hearing the pitch change in its hum. And more than that, he could feel the pulse of the alien tech around him. We started calling him Ghost Link after that. Half man, half antenna. And he wasn't the only one changing. Our medics had started injecting synth stims in microdoses, not for healing, but for acceleration. Cellular speed up, enhanced muscle fiber density, neuron conductivity. It came with side effects, tremors, hallucinations, flashes of heat behind the eyes, but it also came with results. Captain Resnick led the change. The man was already built like war itself, but after the biomods, he moved like something the Ashborn should have feared more than flame. Faster reflexes, stronger grip. No need for exosuit assist anymore. The suit just slowed him down. And still, the galaxy above stayed quiet. Watching. That's when Ghostlink dropped the next bomb on us. "They're not just watching," he said. "They're learning from us." He pointed to the eastern ridge where a fresh Warden drone had been found. Fried, limbs melted, no visible damage from us. We didn't take it down. It had failed. "They're running simulations in real time," he said. "They're testing new iterations. Every tactic we use, every upgrade we make, it gets mirrored. They're trying to close the gap, and they're close." "How close?" Resnick asked. Ghostlink looked at the sky. 1 generation. We all knew what that meant. The next Warden wouldn't just be armored or intelligent, it would be adaptive. So we decided to strike first. The plan was madness, a full-force assault on the beacon Cradle, the orbital tower that had once connected the Taraxis colony to the upper atmosphere. It had collapsed during the Bio-War, but its base still stood, shattered and silent. We figured the aliens had been using it as a relay, a transmitter, maybe even a hive mind control point for the Ashborn. It was time to burn it. We geared up. 40 soldiers fit for frontline combat, another 20 assigned to perimeter defense. 8 wounded but willing, rigged with explosive packs and rail charges in case they had to go out hard. We marched through the canyon paths in silence. Every one of us carried at least one piece of alien tech now, salvaged, hacked, or implanted. Our suits were mismatched armor, jury-rigged gear, and plasma-fed rage. What used to be a unit was now a pack, a force. Resnick led the charge with the phrase that had become our creed. Cast us out, watch us rise. The beacon Cradle loomed like a corpse, metal skeleton stabbed into the horizon, half buried in sand and ash. But the moment we stepped into its shadow, the temperature dropped, and the whispers began. I don't mean metaphorical whispers, I mean real ones, voices inside our helmets, not in a language, not even in sound, just thought, echoes that didn't belong to us. They were in our memories, our regrets, our fears. The Warden tech we'd integrated wasn't just hardware, it was a gateway, and someone had just opened it. Half the squad froze, eyes wide, some started convulsing, others just stared, drooling, as if their minds were being folded inside out. Resnick roared at us to pull back, but Ghostlink stood still, calm. They're trying to overwrite us, he whispered. How do we stop it? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my rifle, pressed it to his own chest, and said, "Kill me if I start speaking in anything that doesn't belong." Then he stepped into the Cradle alone. Minutes passed. Then came the scream. Not his, theirs. The entire tower began to pulse. The metal vibrated, humming with a frequency so low it made our teeth ache. And then Ghostlink's voice came through the comms. I found it. Found what? The core AI, the Watcher, the one they built to control this place. Is it alive? It's not alive, it's afraid. Resnick didn't hesitate. Lock onto his signal, all charges, direct fire at that location. We rained hell into the heart of the beacon Cradle. 37 plasma shells, 4 full railgun clips, 2 suicide charges detonated by drones. The tower screamed. It wasn't metal breaking. It was something inside. A consciousness. A mind. Something too big and old to die like that. But it died. The Cradle collapsed. Fire tore through the sky like a second sunrise. For the first time since we'd been dumped on this planet, no Ashborn came that night. We dragged Ghostlink from the wreckage. He was unconscious. Neural threads bleeding from his skin, but alive. And on his chest, burned into his skin by the explosion, was the symbol from the Warden's ship. But it was crossed out. A mark of war. They weren't Watchers anymore. Now they were enemies. We had made our point, loud and clear. You don't bury humans and expect silence. You don't cage us and expect submission. You cast us out, and we come back reforged. They called it a corrective purge. We called it revenge dressed in protocol. 3 days after we reduced the beacon Cradle to molten steel and scattered alien code, the skies over Taraxis 9 broke open. Not just one ship, not a scouting orb or a Warden drone. No, this was a fleet, sleek black vessels that moved without thrust. No lights, no signal, just mass and silence. They didn't orbit. They hovered in low atmo like executioners waiting for the signal to drop the axe. At first, We thought they were watching again. Then the first beam hit. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. No fire, no explosion. Just a sound. Deep, pulsing, like a heartbeat through the bones of the planet. Structures cracked, walls trembled, then the Ashborn swarmed again, only this time they were driven. Controlled, synced to the pulse. They were no longer acting on instinct. They were being puppeted, every movement calculated, every strike coordinated, no hesitation, no fear. We held the Bastion for 17 hours. 17 hours of non-stop assault. 17 hours of burning through everything we had. The plasma turrets overheated, the mines fried out. 2 walls collapsed from the pressure. One of our own railguns exploded from overuse, taking 3 men with it. Ghostlink was unconscious again, his brain still recovering from the direct interface with the Watcher AI. I saw Resnick in the southern corridor, his arm hanging limp from a dislocated shoulder, bark orders like a machine. No sleep, no hesitation. That man wasn't born to live through peace. Then the message came. Not from above, from within. Ghostlink's voice came through the emergency channel, but it wasn't just him. It was him and something else. Humanity, you are outside your authority. Your rebellion is noted. Your sentence, reclassification and controlled extinction. Resnick stepped into the war room, bloodied and shaking, and snapped the screen in half with one punch. "Screw that," he growled. "You want extinction? Come get it." But we knew we couldn't hold the Bastion. Not this time. Not against them. So, we did what humanity does best when cornered. We changed the rules. Resnick ordered an evacuation. Not a retreat, a full dispersion. We split into cells of 5 to 7, moving through subterranean tunnels left over from the colony's terraforming era. The Ashborn couldn't follow underground. Not yet. Daiko, Ghostlink, came to in the middle of the move, eyes bloodshot, voice weak. "They're panicking," he said. "You call this panic?" I snapped, ducking under a collapsing pipe. "No," he said, grimacing. "Not the fleet. The ones behind it. The architects." That was the first time we heard the name. The architects, the ones who had created the Ashborn, designed the Wardens, and programmed the Watcher AI to monitor failed colony zones. They were the quiet governors of forgotten worlds. The silent hands that made sure the broken stayed buried. "They never expected us to last past the first month," Daiko muttered as we patched his neural ports. "Now we're interfering with their simulations. We've polluted the system." "What happens when a system is polluted?" I asked. He looked at me like I should already know. "You delete it." Resnick heard that, and it lit a fire behind his eyes I hadn't seen before. "So we're not just fighting for ourselves anymore," he said. "We're fighting to prove we have the right to exist." The next few days were chaos. We scattered across Tyraxis 9 like a virus, rooting into old facilities, scavenging alien wrecks, setting traps in every corridor. But it wasn't random. It was coordinated. Ghostlink gave us the blueprint. The architect's systems still pulsed through the old Cradle network. We couldn't control it, but we could trace it, like following wires back to a central fuse box. And what we found was shocking. The architects hadn't just dropped us here. They'd dropped others, human units, test colonies, failed divisions, even alien defectors who didn't align with the architect philosophy of controlled order. Whole groups had been purged and forgotten. Not because they were hostile, but because they were independent. Tyraxis 9 wasn't a graveyard. It was one of many landfills. We accessed partial data from a downed Warden brain core. It was fragmented, but enough to confirm it. 17 planets classified as failed potential. 43 factions marked for extinction. No survivors allowed. Resnick slammed his fist on the table when he saw the names. "How many did we let them bury?" he asked. No one answered. Because the truth wasn't that we let them. It was that we never knew. Humanity had reached the stars on shaky alliances. The Galactic Council accepted Earth into its ranks not because we were advanced, but because we were useful. Cannon fodder, expandable, containable. Now we had proof that the Council had known about the architects all along, and said nothing. That was when everything changed. We stopped calling it survival. We started calling it war, not just for us, but for every voice that had been silenced, every colony erased, every planet left to rot. The resistance began small, cells activating on forgotten moons, messages bouncing across dead satellites, rogue AI systems reprogrammed with human empathy. It spread like wildfire because no species likes to be told they were never supposed to matter. But our first major strike had to count. Ghostlink identified an uplink spire on Taraxis's northern ridge, still active, still pulsing signals back to the Architect Core network. It wasn't guarded by Ashborn. It wasn't protected by Wardens. It didn't need to be. It was considered invisible because everything near it was supposed to be dead. We changed that. 2 strike teams, 20 soldiers total, me, Resnick, and Ghostlink leading, armed with hybrid tech, explosive charges, and something new Dyko called a neural rot bomb. Built from Warden code, it would scramble AI pathways, turning logic trees into corrupted spirals. We stormed the ridge under cover of night, using Ashborn mimicry cloaks, ugly skin-like wraps that smelled of death, but made their sensors ignore us. Resnick hated every second in that suit. Next time? I'm blowing the front gate down, he grumbled. No next time if we screw this up, I said. The spire was alive. We didn't realize it until we were inside. The walls pulsed like muscle. The floor reacted to our weight. It wasn't a building. It was a thinking organism. And it knew we were there. The deeper we went, the more it fought back. Walls shifted. Pathways closed. We lost 2 soldiers to internal acid vents, systems designed to cleanse impurities. But we made it to the core. Resnick and I held the line while Ghostlink plugged in, neural port sparking. He screamed as soon as the connection synced. They know who we are, he gasped. They're afraid. Then do it, Resnick growled. Make them remember why. Ghostlink activated the rot bomb. The core screamed, a shriek that wasn't sound. It was memory dying. The spire began to melt, collapsing inward, black liquid spilling from its veins. We barely escaped before it crumbled. As we watched it fall, Resnick turned to the rest of us, his face dark. They erased whole worlds, he said. It's time we erase them. And that was the moment we stopped being survivors. We became vengeance. They didn't send ships, they didn't send drones or wardens. What the architects sent next wasn't a weapon. It was a message, not like before. No sterile voice, no threat disguised in diplomacy. This time it came through Ghostlink, who was still recovering from the spire core collapse. He hadn't spoken in 2 days, hooked into a cryo chamber with neural inhibitors to keep his overloaded brain stable. When he woke, it wasn't his voice we heard. It was theirs. The medbay fell silent when he started speaking. Everyone froze, even Resnick. Because the voice wasn't mechanical, it was human, familiar, warm, but every word was wrong. You have made your point. Rebellion acknowledged. Damage noted, but continuation of your path will result in complete termination. You are not the first. You are not unique. We have ended better species. Ghostlink's eyes were open, glowing faintly. He stared at the ceiling like he was looking through it into something bigger than the planet. You think yourselves resilient, but we made resilience. We engineered defiance. We understand every limit, and we will snap yours. Then his voice dropped, cracked with something deeper, almost apologetic. You should not have awakened the others." And then he screamed. Blood streamed from his nose and ears as his body convulsed, and every monitor around him exploded in static. It took 4 of us to hold him down while Resnick jabbed a dampener straight into his neural port. The second it pulsed, Ghostlink went limp. He was still alive. But we knew. The message wasn't for him. It was for all of us. A council was called. Our first one. Not in a war room, not in a command center. In the catacombs of the old mining facility beneath the eastern cliffs. A place the Ashborn wouldn't enter, where the walls still hummed with ancient machines but no architect tech dared operate. Representatives from the last remaining squads, engineers, fighters, Daiko's apprentices, and Resnick, towering at the center like a dying god made of hate and steel. He didn't waste time. They know what we are now, and more importantly. He paused, looking around at the faces hardened by blood and betrayal. They know what we're becoming. A silence followed, not fearful, heavy, because we all felt it. In our bones, in our blood. The changes, the shifts. We weren't like the men and women who arrived on Taraxis 9 anymore. We had outlived our limitations. Some of us hadn't eaten in days and still fought at full strength. Others slept in 5-minute bursts, dreams packed with data and code. Ghostlink wasn't the only one hearing them anymore. Others had started feeling pulses in the ground, dreaming in languages they'd never learned, building devices no one had taught them to build. The war wasn't just making us harder. It was making us other. Resnick leaned forward on the fractured slab we used as a table. They sent a warning instead of an army. Why? No one answered. So he did. Because they can't predict us anymore. We're off the path. An anomaly, and anomalies, are contagious. He tapped the map of Taraxis we'd drawn by hand. Layers of reclaimed sectors, buried outposts, old AI clusters. And in the corner, new signals, flickers of data from outside the planet, intercepted fragments, alien code laced with human frequencies. They're spreading, Daiko muttered. Other worlds are hearing us. It started small, encrypted bursts pinging from distant systems. Then came voices. One, from a derelict station in orbit around a dead moon. We received the Taraxis pulse. Are you human? Another, from deep within an asteroid field marked as cleansed by architect records. Earthborn, abandoned, still fighting. And then, from a planet we only knew by its designation. Kiral 6, flagged for permanent quarantine. We saw your sky burn. Show us how. We weren't alone anymore. Taraxis had become a beacon, but with light comes shadow. The architects responded, not with fleets, but with constructs. Symbionts. They looked human, moved like us, spoke like us, but they weren't us. They were AI-grown flesh, embedded with loyalty code, infused with architect directives. Perfect infiltrators. They bled red, cried, smiled, but underneath, they were programmable obedience. The first one we discovered was Callan, a medic we'd trusted since week 3. She was kind, quiet, and always first to the wounded. When she tried to detonate the prototype fusion rig in Engineering Sector 4, Resnick caught her with a single round to the neck. She didn't scream. She just smiled as the flesh peeled back and exposed the circuit-laced spine beneath. After that, we ran diagnostics on everyone. Ghostlink was too weak to help. So we relied on Daiko's team, crude tests, neural echo checks, retinal pulse syncs. We found 5 more, 5. People we'd fought beside, laughed with, mourned losses with, and all of them were architect seeds, planted to study, to manipulate, to report back. We executed them. Quick, brutal, no speeches, no mercy. Something inside us cracked that day, a fracture deeper than combat could inflict. Resnick stood over the bodies and whispered, "They don't get to wear our skin anymore." That night, none of us slept, because none of us knew how many more there were, because some of us had started dreaming in numbers. By day 120, our communications array had reached over 11 systems, confirmed human colonies abandoned or purged, alien species marked for extinction due to non-compliance. We weren't fighting a hidden war anymore. This was becoming a revolution. We had a new goal: reach the source. Ghostlink, recovering slowly, confirmed it through fragmented Warden code. There was a hub world, a planetary system-sized machine, the origin point of the Architect network, where they processed simulations, monitored anomalies, executed purges, a place called Felgard. We weren't ready for it, not yet. But we would be. Every outpost we took back, every piece of tech we cracked, every species we woke up from silence added to our strength. The engineers began shaping new armor, less Terran, more hybrid, fluid lines, adaptive mesh, living circuits. Resnick refused the new gear. "I want them to see what they left behind," he growled. We trained relentlessly. We modified faster. We built faster. And beneath the surface, deep in the old dig zones, we unearthed something. Strange. It wasn't human. It wasn't Architect. A vault. Metal unlike anything in our databanks. Symbols etched in endless rings that reacted to touch. When Ghostlink approached, they glowed and opened. Inside wasn't a weapon. It was a message, not in words, in visions. We saw cities floating in stars, machines the size of planets harvesting energy from dark matter. A war fought in silence between light and something older than creation. And at the center, a figure, not human, not Architect, something between. The message ended with a single phrase embedded in every soldier's mind. "You are not the first to rise, but you must be the last to fall." Resnick said nothing for a long time after that. Then he turned to me. "Start preparing the Exodus ships." I blinked. "We're leaving Taraxis?" He shook his head. "No. We're spreading the fire." It began with the stars blinking out. One by one, tiny pinpricks of light across Taraxis's night sky vanished like dying embers. Not because they went supernova. Not because clouds hid them. They were blacked out, consumed by the arrival of something so vast it cast shadows between galaxies. It wasn't a fleet. It was a construct. Ghostlink was the first to detect it, even before our orbital rigs picked up the mass signatures. He bolted upright in the medbay, eyes glowing like plasma cores, whispering through clenched teeth, "It's here! The Architect sent their alpha!" We scrambled to triangulate it. At first we thought it was a ship. Then we thought it was a planet. We were wrong. It was both. Neither. More. Resnick watched the early visuals, grainy, trembling footage from deep sky scanners, with arms crossed and lips tight. The object didn't move through space. It shifted through it, folding light and dust like a blade through smoke. We called it the Pale Choir, because when it arrived in orbit, every comms channel on Taraxis rang with one shared frequency, a sound like thousands of human voices screaming in perfect harmony. But when slowed down and translated, it wasn't a scream. It was prayer. Submit, adapt, become. That was their final offer. The Exodus ships were barely flight-worthy when the Pale Choir arrived. We had been building them in secret, deep in the volcanic craters on Tyraxis's dark side. Each one was a fusion of Architect scrap and human ingenuity. Sleek, angular, brutal. They weren't ships in the traditional sense. They were invasion blades, designed not just to travel, but to tear through whatever stood between us and the heart of the Architect network. They were meant for war. We launched 2 of them anyway. Resnick ordered it. I argued, said they weren't ready, that we needed another week to align the plasma stabilizers, that the antimatter vents were unstable. He looked at me like I hadn't been paying attention. "We don't have a week," he growled. "We don't even have a day." He was right, because the pale choir had started its descent, and the Ashborn were rising with it. But they weren't what they used to be. Not mindless, hungry, savage. These were tall, armored, controlled. Their skin no longer gray and rotting, now plated in a black chitinous armor threaded with silver veins of energy. The architects had evolved them. Perfected their pawns. We called the new ones seraphs. And they didn't swarm. They marched. Rows of them. Precise, cold, mathematical. No screams, no fury, just the systematic advance of a species that had been ordered to erase anything unaligned with architect design. Taraxis became a war zone again overnight. This time our traps barely slowed them down. Our guns worked, but only for a few seconds, before the seraphs adapted, deflecting energy pulses, breaking rail shots with their bare hands. They moved through our kill zones like shadows, and behind them, the choir sang. Not music, not sound, just pressure. Thought. Voice without form. Ghostlink began to break. He was one of the first to evolve beyond baseline human, spliced with architect tech, fused with their neural thread, and now the choir was reaching into his mind. Not to kill, to call him back. "They want me," he said, shaking, covered in sweat and blood, "because I'm the first to leave the system. I'm their experiment gone wrong." Resnick looked at him like he was staring at a man already buried. "Then make sure you're their last." Ghostlink didn't respond. He just stood up, walked to the Eastern Defense Station, and plugged into the architect interface panel we'd captured from the Spire ruins. We tried to stop him. We failed. His body seized, spasmed, began to burn from the inside out. And then, the tower above us, the one housing our primary defense array, began to glow. Symbols none of us could read pulsed to life. Not red, not blue. Something between. Daiko stared in awe. "He's rewriting their code." And then we saw it. The seraphs hesitated. For just a second. A flicker of confusion in their perfectly timed movements. One unit turned on another. A second dropped its weapon. Ghostlink opened his eyes. Blood ran down his face. He smiled. "They're not immune to doubt." Resnick didn't hesitate. He turned to me, barking orders. "Signal the outposts. Use the pattern. Tell them to broadcast Ghostlink's code through every rig we've got. If this works..." "It'll crack them open," I finished. But Ghostlink was already dying. His brain was liquefying from the inside out. His body couldn't hold what he'd done. His last words before the neural fires consumed him. "Tell them. We learned how to sing too." And then he was gone. But the signal, his signal, was already spreading. Across Taraxis, the tide turned, not by force, by disruption. The seraphs began to stagger. Slow. Question. Some screamed in distorted architect code and tore at their own armor. Others froze and collapsed, as if the command string inside them had been corrupted beyond recovery. We pressed the advantage. Resnick led the charge. I followed with Daiko and 6 others through the ruins of our own shattered bastion, now turned into a battlefield so scarred we didn't recognize our own fortifications. The pale choir didn't retreat. It began to descend. Not a ship falling, a god arriving. We saw it up close as it broke through the cloud layer. It wasn't solid, it wasn't metal. It was a shape of will, a lattice of code, memory, voice, and death, wearing the skin of an idea. And from its base, something emerged. Humanoid. Tall. Floating. We didn't know what to call it at first. It had a face, but no eyes. It had arms, but no motion. It just hovered, wrapped in energy that cracked the ground beneath it. It spoke. You rejected compliance. You were offered adaptation. You chose oblivion. Resnick stepped forward, bloodied, gun smoking. No, he spat. We chose to be human, and he fired. The shot didn't land. The being, we later called it the Archon, caught the bolt mid-air, froze it, crushed it, and then looked at us, not with rage, but something worse. Pity. And then it said, so be it. Burn alone. It raised its hand, and everything turned white. When I woke, I couldn't hear, couldn't speak, just pressure, pain, heat. Daiko pulled me from the rubble, half burned, half deaf. The crater where the Archon had stood was gone, vaporized. But so was Resnick. All that remained was a piece of his armor, melted to slag, and a scorched mark where he'd made his final stand. The Archon had vanished, the pale choir was gone. Ghostlink's signal had done something. We didn't win, but we survived. And that, more than anything, was the greatest defeat we could hand the architects, because survivors carry fire, and now we were ready to share it. As we repaired what remained of our systems, messages began to arrive, stronger this time. Whole paragraphs, voices from distant worlds now alive with resistance. From Kirill 6. Your code woke our sleepers, we are rising. From the dead moon station, we've purged their influence, joining your network. From Earth, yes, Earth, they heard. A scrambled transmission, fragmented, desperate. Tarax's command, we read your pulse. Confirm location, confirm surviving units. Earth command acknowledges your signal. Daiko stared at me. They're listening now. I nodded. Then we're coming home. But we weren't returning as victims. We were returning as evidence. That humanity wasn't just adaptable, it was indigestible. The architects tried to bury us. Now we were going to dig them out by the roots. The message from Earth was short, shaky, and encoded in the old Terran military encryption. The kind they used before we even had faster-than-light communications. But despite the static and fragment drops, 3 words cut through like a blade. We hear you. I stared at the transmission log, numb. Earth, after 126 days of silence, after being tossed aside like war trash, fed to a planet with monsters for soil and death for rain. They heard us. The chamber we had rebuilt beneath the ruins of Bastion was barely holding together. Engineers worked around the clock, trying to stabilize the comms relay built from fusion-scorched alien circuitry and 6 neural cores taken from dismembered seraphs. We had just enough power left to get 1 full uplink to Earth. Resnick would have known exactly what to say. But Resnick was gone. So they turned to me. I stood in front of the interface, face half wrapped in gauze, voice half hoarse from the dust and the screaming and the fire. I leaned in, tapped the mic, and said what needed to be said. This is Lieutenant Commander Aaron Voss, 17th Terran Recon Division. Cast out, forgotten. Now, reborn. We survived the purge. The architects failed. Taraxis still burns, but it burns with us. We've intercepted your code. We know you watched it happen, and you did nothing, you let them bury us. So now, Earth, here's the price. We're not asking for help. We're not asking for forgiveness. We're telling you one thing. We're coming home. The feed cut just as the power grid collapsed again. Daiko gave me a look like I'd just punched a senator in the face. Subtle, he muttered. I turned away, grabbing my gear. We're past subtle, I said. They left us to die. Now they get to decide whether they want to kneel beside us or end up in our way. But Earth wasn't the only one listening. In the silence that followed our transmission, Ghostlink's signal, the same neural code that had broken the Pale Choir's control, spread further than we ever intended. It didn't just wake old colonies. It didn't just destabilize Architect protocol, it rattled the roots. Daiko called it the breach. The moment when Architect system walls began to return false logs, glitches, data loops, conflicting histories, the kind of internal corruption that comes from something deeper waking up inside the system. One name kept appearing in the old code, Nadir Protocol. It wasn't a weapon, it was a vault. Buried under the polar regions of Taraxis, deeper than any mining rig had ever gone, we found it, a sealed chamber, miles below the old tectonic stabilizers. The architects hadn't built it, they'd locked it. The vault walls weren't metal, they weren't even physical in the traditional sense. They bent reality around them, distorting gravity and light. The deeper we went, the more unstable the air became. Time lagged, words echoed wrong. We weren't supposed to be there. Inside we found a being, not alive, not dead, suspended. A creature bound in layers of architect code and ancient alloy, flesh wrapped in crystallized memory. Its body pulsed faintly, like a heart beating once every 100 years. Daiko was terrified, and he wasn't the type to scare easy. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Not for a long time. Then finally, "It's their origin." We learned the truth in fragments, from corrupted data shards, from seraphs that broke down when Ghostlink's virus rewired their memory stacks, from the echoes bouncing through the vault's neural field. The architects weren't gods, they were disciples. Thousands of years ago, they'd discovered this creature buried beneath a dying world, a being they couldn't kill, couldn't understand, and couldn't control. So they did what weak empires always do with what they fear. They worshipped it, and they called it the first voice. It had no mouth, no eyes, but its presence infected everything: machines, minds, species. The architects reshaped their entire civilization around the fragments it whispered, their control, their logic, their obsession with order and extinction. All of it was rooted in the broken, maddened transmission of the first voice. But even they couldn't contain it completely, so they built vaults. Not prisons, cages, and buried it on worlds like Taraxis, places they marked for death, places no one was meant to survive. Until we did. We should have destroyed the vault. We tried, rigged it with 4 fusion cores, half a dozen rot bombs, and a black matter spike rigged from pale choir tech. It laughed, not in sound, in us. Daiko was the first to fall. He started seeing things. Memories that weren't his. Future events that hadn't happened. Past lives that couldn't have been real. He stopped sleeping. Then stopped blinking. Then he stared at the vault for 3 days and whispered the same word over and over. Singularity. We had to sedate him, strap him down, but the damage was done. The first voice had touched us. It had no army, no ships, no weapons. It didn't need them, because it used us. Across Taraxis, others began to crack. Soldiers who had been loyal for months suddenly turned, not traitorous, not hostile, just wrong. Like their minds had been replaced with something smoother, cleaner. Architect-like, not control, infection. The first voice didn't dominate through fear. It convinced. It offered peace, clarity, an end to suffering, an end to doubt. It was seductive, and that made it more dangerous than any fleet we had ever faced. By day 1-41, we were down to just under 400 survivors, out of the thousands who had once stood on this soil. Most of the old outposts were abandoned, the battlefields silent. The seraphs that hadn't self-terminated had retreated to the poles, forming what Daiko called containment rings. The architects hadn't sent more reinforcements. They were watching again, watching to see if we would become the next infection, because they knew. The voice wasn't speaking to just us anymore. It had reached Earth. Our intercepted signal logs confirmed it. A facility on Mars, shut down for over a decade, had suddenly gone hot. A dormant AI satellite orbiting Saturn lit up with alien code. A power grid fluctuation in Geneva aligned perfectly with the vault's pulse rhythm. The voice was spreading through the same paths we had opened. And Earth? Earth was wide open. So we made the hardest call. We had to leave. Leave Taraxis. Leave the graves, the ruins, the soil soaked in blood and fire. We didn't want to. We wanted to fight here, die here, prove this world had meant something. But that's what the voice wanted, to trap us, bind us in memory and rage until we became its next choir. So we sealed the vault the only way we could, with blood. We lost 50 men rigging the final implosion charges. Implosion, not explosion, designed to collapse space in on itself, fold the vault into a singularity, and scatter the contents across quantum fragments. The vault screamed. Not a sound, not in the air, in our bones. We felt it. But we detonated anyway. It worked. We think. The vault's presence vanished. The air returned. Light stabilized. And Daco, sedated and screaming, finally went still. Then we boarded the Exodus ships. We left Taraxis behind, not in retreat, not in fear, but in warning. Our first stop was Mars, not Earth, not yet. We couldn't go back home until we knew who else had been listening. As we approached Martian orbit, the old Terran defense satellites locked onto us. Daco, still recovering, rewired their recognition protocol in minutes. The Earth Command finally responded. Unidentified fleet, state origin and designation. I leaned forward, staring through the bridge viewport at the red world we once thought of as our first step into the stars. And I said, "We're the Ash-Forged, born in the fire you left behind. We carry the song of your sins, and we're here to show you what it made us." We never expected a parade. No banners, no welcome, no apologies. When the Ash-Forged fleet, 2 Exodus ships and a dozen salvaged dropships carved from architect wreckage, breached Earth's orbital security network. We triggered every planetary defense protocol written in the last 100 years. To them, we were unrecognized, unsanctioned, and uninvited. But the thing is, we didn't come for permission. The Earth Command Council, hidden away in their fortified arcologies and sky towers, demanded identification, threatened orbital strikes, sent drones to intercept us, scan us, dissect us from afar. What they saw terrified them. Our ships bore no nation's flag. Our bodies wore no standardized armor. Our minds, some of them weren't even fully human anymore. We were the consequence of their silence, and they saw it in our eyes. Our landing was hard, deliberate, tactical dominance. Not a crash, not an attack, but a message. You don't own us anymore. We touched down in the dead zone once known as Old Houston, a reclamation site gutted by climate collapse and political cowardice 50 years earlier, still laced with failed terraforming veins and rusted-out skeletons of skyscrapers. It felt fitting. A place Earth had already abandoned once before. Daco led the diagnostics team while I secured the perimeter. Ghostlink's remains, what was left of his neural drive, were locked in a black case sealed with plasma glass. His code still pulsed faintly, a silent reminder of what it had cost to survive Taraxis. And Resnick, his name had become something like myth among the younger Ash-Forged. They whispered it with reverence and rage, like the name of a fallen god. It was my job now to carry the mission forward. The first envoy came quietly. 3 suits, high level. Probably politicians once, now reduced to nervous mouthpieces wrapped in armor they didn't know how to calibrate. They approached with drones buzzing overhead and security bots flanking them like shepherds walking tigers on leashes. They didn't offer condolences. They didn't ask questions. They started with demands. "We require full disclosure of your neural augmentation systems," one of them said. "Biological enhancements must be reported for planetary compatibility. You're not authorized to operate advanced systems without UNCG clearance." Daiko laughed. I didn't. I stepped forward, helmet off, scars raw across my jaw, and said the words they didn't expect to hear. "You left us to die." That shut them up. I continued. "You let the architects do your dirty work. You signed our death warrants and called it protocol. And now you're scared because we came back with tech you can't understand and minds you can't predict. This isn't a negotiation. We didn't come to explain. We came to warn." The tallest suit squinted at me. "Warn us of what?" Daiko tapped his chest. His heartbeat glowed. "The voice," he said. "It's coming here." They didn't believe us. Of course they didn't. Earth hadn't seen what Taraxis became. They hadn't heard the choir or stood beneath the pale sky as the seraphs descended like ghosts in armor. They hadn't watched a man bleed code from his eyes as he rewrote alien systems by thought alone. To them, the war was distant. History. But wars don't end when you stop watching. They end when the ones you tried to bury dig their way back out, wearing fire and vengeance like armor. And unfortunately for Earth, we weren't the only ones digging. The voice made its way here in silence. No ships, no armies, just echoes. It crept through the signals we'd sent, through Ghostlink's code, through the broken protocols Earth's networks had never truly scrubbed. It didn't need force. It needed resonance. And when it found it, it didn't announce itself. It infected. The first signs came from the lower arcologies. People reported dreams of unfamiliar stars, whispers in languages they never learned, visions of Taraxis, places they'd never seen but could describe in detail. Then came the stillness. Entire facilities where staff stopped moving, breathing, thinking, just stopped. Standing, frozen, staring up into nothing. Daiko's eyes went wide when we confirmed the first outbreak. "It's not spreading," he said. "It's awakening." The first voice had always been here, in fragments, in whispers, in the tech Earth had reverse-engineered from alien ruins and never fully understood. And now that we'd brought a part of it back, it remembered. The Ashforged activated the failsafe. It was a last-resort protocol Resnick had designed before his death, a full-system neural scrub, capable of purging any signal above a Class 7 frequency. But it came with a cost. Any augmented soldier exposed would burn out. Their minds would fracture. Their bodies might survive. But everything that made them human wouldn't. Daiko looked at me across the console, blinking slow. "You sure about this?" I nodded. "If we don't stop it here, there won't be anything left to stop." We engaged the pulse. Earth's sky turned red. For 10 minutes, the planet shook with an electromagnetic surge so violent that power grids collapsed, satellites fried, and augmented systems screamed into silence. Thousands of cyborgs flatlined. Entire architect-born AI programs died. The first voice screamed. And then, it was quiet. In the aftermath, Earth changed. Not just politically, not just militarily, culturally. The people finally saw what had been hidden from them. That humanity had made deals in the dark. That they had built their golden cities on the bones of soldiers like us. That silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of consent. The Ashforged didn't rise as conquerors. We rose as witnesses. We didn't demand revenge. We didn't burn capitals. We told the truth. And that was worse than any bullet. The Earth Council was dismantled within a month. The colonies that had been marked for abandonment declared independence, backed by Ashforged fleets. The resistance became a federation, not of species, not of empires, of survivors. Built on a single creed, No one gets buried again. Daiko died 2 weeks later. His mind had held too much for too long, but before he passed, he left behind something. Not a weapon, not a virus, a map, drawn in pulses, carved in code, leading to a place beyond architect space, a place labeled simply Origin. We don't know what's there. Maybe it's where the voice was born. Maybe it's where something greater waits to awaken. But we're going. Because we're not just soldiers anymore. We're not just survivors. We are ash-forged. And we're ready to end what they started. From the ashes, our new world began. But the stars? The stars are where we take our future by fire.